Hello folks, I will do a quick brief intro. Basically, chemtrails. Even whenever I hear someone mention chemtrails, it's almost gotten to the point where it's like the flat earth theory or Loch Ness monster or the Sasquatch, the Bigfoot, right? It's one of those conspiracy theories. Well, you know, it's one of those things where if people mention chemtrails, you're now officially regarded as a crazy conspiracy theory. I mean, Illuminati stuff, you know, that holds a little bit more sway, actually. But chemtrails, wow. Chemtrails, really? Chemtrails, people are going to say? Well, let's watch these two videos, and then let's have a discussion afterwards. It should be easy to figure out chemtrails. We've discussed it a little bit before on our open topics, anything goes type of things. Well, this one is dedicated to chemtrails. Let's see what we find. You know, they tell us not to watch. They say it's conspiracy theorist stuff. So I'm gonna go ahead and watch. This first one is going to be Stranger Than Fiction. Science can't explain this. It's happening now worldwide, 2018 to 2019. Definitely some clickbait title. Made on June 5th, 2018. All the links to these videos are in the description box below.
Delta 150 Heavy, contact on for 9 for taxi, good day.
Can you grab a sheet for India Virginia?
I'm sorry, you good, folks?
Sir, I want to go from Terminal 7 to 10. Via Alpha, Alpha 5. So I just want to move ahead to Terminal 12. Leave flight left 775. We have Alpha 1.
Contact
level 200, direct call Zulu Romeo, it's
Hello.
Hi.
Do you speak English?
Sure, what do you need?
Okay, just a question. Do you know what is a chemtrail?
The what?
A chemtrail.
I do know what a chemtrail is.
Yeah, and is it true?
Well, there's a big debate.
Okay. No.
I don't want to go on record for that.
Okay. No, but do you believe it? I don't think no.
Well, I don't have enough information for that.
Okay. Yeah, but
Hey, wanna play some video games? I know I do. I haven't seen the sun in years.
because I saw a lot of videos on the internet, and it really looks believable.
Well, it's arguable both ways, I think.
Yeah.
Depends on which side you're on, but
Yeah. But what is your personal opinion of it?
I think there's part of truth.
Part of truth, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should investigate this, because when it's true, imagine so many people, they suffer of this.
Yeah, it's a necessary evil, as you would say.
Yeah.
About the chemtrail generator.
Oh.
So let's make sure that that thing's working. We're gonna go check this out.
I gotta...
Oh, look at that! They're working. They're working. You can see the chemtrails coming out of the entrance here. Look at that.
I'm dying to take a picture
Oh,
of
that's cool.
my neighbor. You got so I see.
I'm doing a video. Chemtrail generators are on, and yeah, there it is. Look, you can see them. All right, that's awesome. It's working.
How much more evidence do you need that they're spraying us with shit? Absolute fucking shit. Oh, there goes another one in the process. Don't tell me these pilots don't know what the fuck they're doing. They know what they're doing. They're spreading chemicals on. Now for the last 2 weeks, it's been hammered like this, and everybody has got a bad chest, a cough, and a cold. Now you're telling me that that's a virus? Something that just naturally occurs? Bullshit. This is where it's coming from. All this shit they're landing on your fucking heads. Wake up, people. It's time to fucking wake up.
Aircraft making a condensation trail is very similar in many ways to when you go outside on a cold day and exhale. You create a condensation trail. That little cloud is a condensation trail. Now, if you take a 2-mile walk on a cold day and you can turn around and you can see your condensation trail tracking all the way back for 2 miles. That's how crazy it is to think that what we're looking in the sky is actually condensation trails.
The contrails, not the chemical, the contrails occur because of cold air, minus 30. It takes high altitude, around 30,000 feet plus. There's carbon dioxide and water vapor in that exhaust. That turns to ice crystals, and that's what you see, the white stream behind it. Those white crystals of ice warm up, dissolve, and the smoke goes away. And it never lasts more than a minute. What we're seeing now, and I first could not believe it, and I started looking at the skies, and these are not normal, they're not natural. There's something going on, I don't know who it is or why they're doing it. All I can testify is it's not natural and it's not normal. It's gotta be some outside influence doing that. Thank you.
See those mountains over there? Not really. They're there, you can't barely see them. Why can't you see him? You say it's fog? It's not fucking fog! It's noon. The fog should have burned off a long time ago. See those mountains? I'm getting sick and tired of being sprayed every fucking night while I sleep. They're spraying the fuck out of us. Calling it fucking fog. It's bullshit. Look at those mountains. You can't even see them, and they're right there, a couple miles away. I'm sick of this shit.
When you look into that and ask questions, they say, oh yeah, contrails. No, contrails are behind a jet. If you see a jet flying very high, the stripe, the condensed stripe behind it, that's normal. But in areas first observed where there's very little population, you see a jet airplane going, it's not only one, they have 4 condensed stripes behind them. They go this way, this way, this way, this way, and then this way, this way, this way, this way. And when you inquire about it, ask people, you recognize that the real climate change scientists are truly ticked off because apparently nobody really is asking them. It's the special interest, in my opinion, it's the oil industry, the energy industry that are blowing smoke up somebody's you know what.
Take a look at these things. I'm supposed to be out shopping and they're spraying chemtrails all goddamn day over my head. It's beginning to look a lot like Chem Sky. Google, is it okay if I make this video? Will I lose my account? Will I be banned from YouTube for recording the fucking sky? Is that okay, Google? Am I allowed to do that? No, you can't show the sky either. Google is completely corrupt. Talk about chemtrails, you lose your fucking channel. How dare you expose the US government and their bullshit lies? How dare you record the fucking sky? 65, 66 passes. Wow, look at all of those contrails. It's all natural. Saturate your sky with chemtrails. You can have a chem halo. Wow, you thought double rainbows were cool? Look at the death in the sky. It's a chem halo. Oh my god. Let's all celebrate as the Nazis slaughter us.
U.S. military whistleblower. She has an amazing, fascinating story that we will share with you here today. Now, Kristen, can you tell us what branch of the military you were in and what you uncovered?
Sure. I was in the Air Force on active duty for 9 years, and I worked in bioenvironmental engineering.
And Now, I know the issue came up with chemtrails. I know that's an extremely controversial issue. A lot of people are extremely divided on this issue, but you actually saw things from your experiences that kind of give it a little bit more validity than I actually saw ever before. Can you go into the details of exactly what you saw?
Yeah, basically to summarize it, part of my job was to know everything that was going on in the military and what type of impact that might have on human health, and then the environmental aspects and impacts. What chemicals are we using? How are we disposing of it? Kind of cradle to grave. So we were the internal compliance people for following OSHA and EPA standards. One part of that process was to approve chemicals, hazardous materials. You know, what are you using? Why do you need it? Where's it being used? And tracking that disposal. After it being brought to my attention about chemtrails or geoengineering, I used to think it was crazy. It actually was disrespectful to my line of work, because here we are trying to prevent environmental aspects and impacts and not have anybody get sick from our operations. But in an attempt to debunk, it changed my life. I started noticing things. I started noticing large quantities on the system where I would approve chemicals that did not have a manufacturer name, wasn't tied to a building, and that was normal protocol. When I started asking questions, I slowly became demonized. A couple years passed after that when I asked again and people realized I was kind of being more vocal about it on social media. I was starting to be thrown into a mental institution and have my daughter taken away.
Wow.
That changed my life. I no longer view the military the same way, and I feel like after 9 years of trying to uphold an oath, I'm able to do that now.
I'm going to tape this time. And so this is what we did before. This is what this is. This is the wine spit test, where you rinse your mouth out and then you take grape juice and you hold it in your mouth and you spit it out into a petri dish. Well, what we did is we used the Zeolite, the Zeoforce. This stuff says it cages this stuff, this stuff that's in these chemtrails that's in our bodies. Okay, so then now Chris is just going to pour in a little bit of that little tiny bit of the 91% alcohol. Watch, the stuff is alive. Watch what happens. Pour some in, just a little. Watch. Look. Look what it does.
Now you can film it up close.
Oh, yeah.
That's totally freaking.
Is that freaking freaky? This is in every single one of us. This is spookier and weirder than I even want to go there. Look at it. It's starting to get the other stuff. It was climbing out of the petri dish. It was like trying to climb out.
Whether people believe in chemtrails or not, the geoengineering should be scary enough. And when people learn about geoengineering, chemtrails will then become apparent, because they're the same.
This is from a snow surface at Mount Shasta. 61,100 micrograms per liter of aluminum. This is just ordinary snow water. And people are drinking this stuff when they're hiking on the mountain. And remember, government action is required at 1,000. This is 61 times over the government limit, and our hikers are drinking this poisonous water on Mount Shasta Mountain itself. Strontium, 383. Barium and strontium will take away from your bone structure, make for weak bone structure. The aluminum, though, that's scary, you know. What is it? Alzheimer's, autism, gosh knows what that's doing.
All right. I've just went out there and got this one. This is the chemtrail aftermath. You can see on the date. This is that white stuff that comes from the chemtrails. And I snatched this off the screen going on the inside. I want to see what this is going to do. Nasty. It's got the little white specks in it too. Oh, and you just toward the top of the water you can see the strands. Okay.
Numerous air quality studies, including from CARB, California Air Quality Resource Board, have named submicron-sized particulates as being particularly harmful for human respiration. Through all the discussions today, I have not heard any mention of this fallout, and has this been studied, and also the effects of a highly reactive metal like aluminum on toxifying soils and waters?
The question is, what would be the effects of these materials on human health if they came down into the stratosphere, in particular small particles and aluminum?
So the collaborators of mine working on the aerosol scheme are actually folks from Carnegie Mellon who focused on human health impacts. And while we haven't published it, that was the very first thing we did, was do the order of magnitude calculation in level pencil and paper, but with an expert on human health impacts about whether there could be an issue. And for aluminum or other particles, there are a lot of toxicological things that need to get looked at seriously. But if you're just thinking about the sheer number of particles and the human health impact of small particles, the answer is, well, we haven't published it. That was the first thing we looked at with some of the leading experts who do epidemiological research on human health impacts, and it's not even close to being an issue.
Just to clarify, so 10 megatons of aluminum dumped into the atmosphere will have no human health impact.
So let me be more careful here. To separate out the toxicological, so the alumina we've only begun to research and published nothing. Alumina we've only begun to research and published nothing.
Dane looked at him and he said, so you're telling me that spraying 10 to 20 megatons of aluminum, as you said, would have no human health effects? He took a deep breath and he swallowed and he said, let me be more careful here.
We haven't done anything serious on alumina, and so there could be something terrible that we'll find tomorrow we haven't looked at.
And that, for me, that was the whole main point of what is going to be coming out to the public. It's the damaging effects of aluminum that are being found around the world in massive amounts. Here's David Keith confronted on this very issue, and he looked, at that point like they just let the cat out of the bag.
Mm-hmm. We haven't done anything serious on alumina, and so there could be something terrible that we'll find tomorrow we haven't looked at.
And telling them that we have to lay a pattern up there to prevent sun energy from hitting Earth. And what they're doing in there, it's now pretty much determined. They're putting the aluminum, barium, and strontium. Now you take these chemicals and run them through a PubMed literature search in respect to human health, you will find more than 3,000 papers. Aluminum alone, aluminum Alzheimer's, right, mental, there's no question about it. Now it so happens, when there were people who really paid attention, if there was due to some weather and air changes, wind patterns, suddenly this stuff what they're laying out there, it comes down in rain. If it falls on crops, it kills the crops. It's like they have big blisters on any one of the crops, vegetables or things like this. Organic crops, totally destroyed, can't even use them. And when it comes to an area, for example, there's like forests, after that, a few weeks after that, they're totally dead. They're toothpicks, and you can see it all on the internet.
Luft- und Raumfahrttechniker und habe Flugzeuge repariert und so weiter. Ich möchte euch jetzt mal ganz kurz erzählen, was ich gemacht habe. Ich habe auf dem militärischen Sonderflughafen Oberpfaffenhofen in Zusammenarbeit mit dem Deutschen Luft- und Raumfahrtzentrum ein Flugzeug mit einer Sprüheinrichtung ausgestattet, was an unserem Himmel giftige Substanzen versprüht. Als ich mit den Beweisen dafür, den Fotos und allem drum und dran, zu meiner grünen Abgeordneten im Bürgerbüro gegangen bin und gesagt habe, hier, so sieht's aus, ich stelle mich jedem Untersuchungsausschuss zur Verfügung, ist 3 Tage später mein Boss zu mir nach Hause gekommen und hat gesagt, ich muss dich entlassen, da werden von ganz oben große Räder gedreht, die ich nicht mehr halten kann. Ich kriege keinen Job mehr in der Luftfahrt.
So you uncovered a lot of these hidden chemicals. Where's the connection with the chemtrails?
Well, the connection is, at first, when I saw these large quantities of aluminum, barium, strontium oxides and sulfates, I thought, well, this could be for an industrialized process, for something called shot peening or, you know, bead blasting, things that you see in kind of the automotive industry. Except those were already accounted for. I already knew how much was used for those processes. It was a little type of different constituent. And the first thing I did, part of my job was to sample air, soil, and water. So that's what I did. I air sampled the soil, the air, and the water. And due to my profession, I know at which levels or limits of detection you need to check that at. And the amount of pollution that was in my area, and this is tests I did in Oklahoma, you know, in Georgia, in Chicago where I'm now. But in taking those samples, I knew the background, because a lot of these things are naturally occurring in elemental, but not in this form and not in this quantity. So how did it get there?
So just to clarify, you see these huge storage containers of these chemicals. Then you do the test on the air and soil, and you see these same chemicals in the air and soil now. And that's pretty much been the main evidence I've seen people who are for chemtrails use, is saying, look at the soil, look at the water, look at all the chemicals in there. And now you're finally the person who's like, wait, I worked in the military, I saw a bunch of these chemicals there. That's crazy.
It is crazy. I used to think it was crazy, and everyone asks, why are there no pictures?
Yeah.
Well, I'd like to see you try to take a picture inside of a restricted air hangar, because you'll have an M16 in your back. Yeah. And the hardest part for people to realize is, you know, where are the pilots? Like, there's people who have come forward, but these people are scared. You look at what's happened to whistleblowers, look at Snowden, look at Manning. People are scared. And I think because this topic is already labeled a conspiracy theory, I don't think the government necessarily views me as a threat yet. And I mean, I know it's not the most safe thing to do, but it's the right thing to do.
It's laughed at, it's made obscure. But just to bring the point home, the question I have is, why are they even chemtrailing? Why is the military and government chemtrailing us? I don't know. What's your understanding of it?
Well, I don't have anything that can solidify, but I do have my opinions, and that is the history of weather weaponry. I mean, you can take away people's monetary system, you can take away people's rights, but you take their food and you disable their ecosystem, that's the #1 way to handicap people. And they've done it since the 40s, it's not new. Also seeing how it started out to be a government program, and then noticing that it is a way for private corporations to profit off this, whether it's controlling agriculture, you know, profiting. There's certain events, you know, you lose money on if it rains, or so knowing that you can kind of predict and control the weather, there's money there. I've also, you know, heard that it could be tied to Agenda 21, but for me, it's not about why. It's just stopping it. It needs to be stopped.
Yeah, and it's called the crazy-ass conspiracy theory. The Chinese are doing it now, openly. They did it for the Olympics.
I mean, they've sprayed people. I'm sure you've heard the St. Louis story. They did biological testing. So if the government is capable of doing that, why is this so hard for people to believe? And I don't know if you've heard about David Keith, but he's actually a geoengineer, Canadian. He works at Harvard. He just wrote a new book on climate engineering, and inadvertently he's brought more awareness to this, because I feel they're getting ready to admit it, and they're trying to sell it to us. You know, it's kind of like they sell vaccines to us, they sell fluoride to us. You know, fluoride is a mining waste product. Well, how can we make that good? You know, put it in your water. So I think that they're trying to now kind of admit it and act like they're going to start doing it, and they've already been doing it.
One thing I don't get is how people still deny chemtrails. You know, for a lot of us it's common knowledge and it's easily observable. People see the shit and they still won't believe their own eyes. Their intuition is broken and they're easily manipulated into agreeing with complete nonsense from the mainstream media. And sometimes the mainstream media even does stories on chemtrails and the programs that utilize these things. Let's look at some comments on a random chemtrail video. Why don't you take off your tinfoil hats and gain some reason or knowledge of aviation? Hey, look guys, there's condensation in the sky. It could be poison. It's a conspiracy. Easily the most ridiculous conspiracy theory I've ever heard. People need to learn how to science. The people that believe that 9/11 was an inside job are nuts. On a scale from 1 to 10, they are about a 9.5 on the idiot scale. If you believe in chemtrails, you're a 10.5 out of 10. You probably believe that little green men are coming to your house and probing your anus while you're sleeping. You guys realize that's water vapor, right? No, the retards think we're being poisoned. Nothing is being exposed here. Chemtrails are a fallacy. They're fucking contrails that do not dissipate. If you read a full, in-depth scientific study on the subject, you would shut the fuck up. The scariest thing about these conspiracy theorists is that they are willing to abandon logic and science because it doesn't support their conspiracy. When you ask for evidence, the conspiracy theorists blah blah blah. Boring! The truth is, these people are either clueless or they are being paid to ridicule the topic in order to turn people away. Even before I started researching this subject, I knew that chemtrails were real just by looking at them. Seeing completely blue skies turn into milky, misty, otherworldly looking alien skies, it just gets so ugly and you could see the hazy particles in the atmosphere all day. Furthermore, just take a quick look at the infamous NASA document that was leaked in 2001. It goes over aerosol warfare. So check this out. This was written by Dennis M. Bushnell, Chief Scientist at NASA Langley Research Center. Future Strategic Issues, Future Warfare, circa 2025. The future is now. There are many things in the pages of this document. I just want to briefly show you page 43, Microdust Weaponry, a mechanical analog to biomicron-sized mechanized dust which is distributed as an aerosol and inhaled into the lungs. Dust mechanically bores into lung tissue and executes various pathological missions. And here on the bottom, a wholly new class of weaponry which is legal. So is the future in 2025 or is it now? You know, that really doesn't even matter. If this paper was released in 2001, then they obviously have been working on things like this and programs like this for many years, most likely many decades. And the paper says circa 2025, which means roughly 2025. I think depending on how you look at it, the time we're living in now can be defined as roughly 2025. And check this out. We go to metabunk.org where this dude named Chuck is like, I found this supposed NASA document. Is it real? And Mick West replies, it's not a new document. It's an old PowerPoint presentation from 2001. There's nothing new in it that's not in many other books and papers on the future of war or futurism in general. Then it just goes on talking that usual Mick West bullshit. So this presentation is nothing to worry about because it's a few years old? Are you kidding me? At least he tried, I guess. After all, he is only an employee for someone that doesn't want information getting out. But still, fuck Mick West. Fuck Mick West. We're gonna hop into this segment on geoengineering from the documentary Shade, the Motion Picture. I highly recommend watching this documentary. The chemtrail piece is top notch and very compelling. It just might be the ticket to changing some stubborn minds. So definitely share this with people. Let's roll it.
If you control the weather, you control everything. You control every food supply and literally every political system.
So what is geoengineering? Well, it's simply the manipulation of our weather by foreign agents.
Geoengineering is now defined as large-scale manipulation of the planetary environment. This is to counteract man-made climate change. This is what the Royal Society published. This is what they put out. So this is their definition, their term of geoengineering.
We have this issue, which we all have to address and is of major importance to all of us, to know that people are modifying our weather. Thus, we have to look at The facts that can be proven about what's going on in the atmosphere, about what's happening, about water vapor and its impacts, about the climate and the weather modification programs that are ongoing, these are real. The public has, relatively speaking, been kept in the dark about geoengineering schemes, plans, global geoengineering governance, and the fact that right now, under research, anyone in the world can start conducting these experiments. So we have people artificially modifying our weather in the western states. California, Pacific Gas and Electric Company, or the city of Los Angeles. It's being modified by the Texas Weather Modification Board in Texas, Colorado, Idaho, Wyoming. Lots of other states are all modifying our weather and changing our climate with extreme implications.
We believe many of them are told that what they're doing is very good for the planet, perhaps saving the planet through this climate remediation.
Do these operations exist? Absolutely. Just look at the US GCRP, or the United States Global Change Research Program. Congress has approved it. It goes up to the presidential supplemental budget. It is absolutely known that they are funding these geoengineering operations.
Our nation and many other advanced nations have been manipulating the weather for some time now. Through government white papers and even IPCC United Nations documents, we know that geoengineering is occurring.
The IPCC, the International Panel on Climate Change, has been meeting for various years on this subject. They have produced reports dating back from 1999 on aviation impacts on the global atmosphere from water vapor and other issues, depleting beneficial atmospheric ozone and other problems. A group of geoengineers, a clique, essentially a small clique, has decided that the answer to our global warming problems are to release particles and chemicals into the atmosphere. David Keith, Ken Caldeira, and a small group of these men affiliated with various universities have promoted this for a long time. One of the things that the geoengineering promoters, this clique, has been doing is that they have been able to keep any voices that would be in opposition to them or want to know about the impacts off the record. In other words, that they have become the experts to go to, and that the public and other people have no say. They go to meetings, they go to U.S. congressional hearings, which were held on geoengineering in 2009 and 2010, 3 of them by the U.S. House Science and Technology Committee. They also went to hearings of the UK Parliament during the same period of time to talk about global geoengineering governance and why these experiments should go forward. One of the people promoting geoengineering is Gregory Benford. One of his papers about doing experiments in the Arctic was that they could conduct these experiments, geoengineering experiments in the Arctic. The people there could live within the experiment. And if any harm came to them, it was okay to sacrifice them in that area in order to conduct this research, because the research was very important for them to do. The other thing he noted in an interview was that you could very easily take a little bit of aluminum and a little bit of barium, and you could produce these clouds and have impacts very easily in the atmosphere.
You've got to, in a sense, engineer all these so you get the right kind of clouds for the effects we want.
It is called geoengineering, fighting global warming by putting a chemical dust in the atmosphere and reflecting harmful radiation back into space.
You could use barium oxide, for example, which makes big fluffy clouds. You could use tiny little bits of aluminum, which is benign in the environment, and essentially manage the climate.
I was concerned about this attitude that it was okay to do this research, and that we, all of us around the world, should be willing to live in their research experiment. And this is unacceptable.
Geoengineer David Keith made a statement a couple of years ago. He said geoengineering gives man godlike power. Now, I've never chased godlike power. Probably very few of the listeners, unless they're the elite who are checking this film out, have not chased godlike power, but it must be one hell of a rush. And I think what most of us can relate to is maybe a relative or a friend who became addicted to a drug. And in that drug addiction, they have put their health and their family members' health at risk in order to get the rush of that drug. What we're finding in rain tests now around the world is what people are calling the chemtrail geoengineering footprint of aluminum, barium, and strontium. These metals match a number of geoengineering patents that were actually designed to specifically spray these metals out of airplanes into the sky for the stated goal of cooling the planet. They match what geoengineers deny they're spraying but state that they want to start spraying.
If we take ground-based tests, for example, it does not prove the source of the pollution that we're finding in our soils, our air, and our water. It only tells us that something is happening which is not good, that aluminum is increasing, that barium is increasing in soil tests, water tests, and that associated problems are there. There is a belief or an opinion that the jets that leave these persistent jet contrails are spraying something into the atmosphere that would impact our health or cause other types of problems. I noticed when I started doing research in 2002 was that the trees in Mendocino County, Lake County, and other areas of Northern California were in extreme decline. It wasn't from anything we could ascertain because it was whole suites of tree species. That means redwood trees, that means oak trees, that means manzanita, that means Douglas fir. It began to occur to many of us that this decline, killing our trees, is removing a beneficial asset for all of us because the trees provide the oxygen that we breathe. They take in carbon dioxide. The trees are beneficial for maintaining stable climates. They're beneficial for watersheds, for the water we drink and the snow that comes through. All the trees that we have are assets of not only the United States but this world. At this time, there is absolute admissions by NASA that persistent jet contrails and the man-made clouds they produce are having an impact on climate. So when NASA gets involved with the military and atmospheric releases of aluminum oxide, trimethyl aluminum, and other particulates, they know that this will have a reflective quality, that the particles will stay in the atmosphere for some period of time before they come back to Earth, and that this will reduce the amount of direct sunlight reaching the Earth. If we rely on the belief system that we believe this without factual proof, then we're in trouble because everyone is going to think that we're a nutcase. And that's what the astrobiologists at NASA say about people who believe in chemtrails. They say, well, we don't have any proof, we're nutcases. And therefore, our voices are marginalized and have been since the 1990s. Starting in 1996, the U.S. Air Force declared that chemtrails was a hoax. The EPA, all of our government agencies had declared that it was an internet hoax, a conspiracy theory. And thus, since I can't define the word chemtrails as there's no definition legally except hoax, I declined to use this term because it would marginalize my voice and the voices of those using it. The one thing we know and can prove is that rocket programs and atmospheric releases from rockets from the military and NASA and other agencies are releasing particles and chemicals into the atmosphere which can have negative effects on us. Some of the same that are said to be released by jets leaving persistent jet contrails.
Well, the Air Force has been wanting to control the weather for some time. In fact, they wanted to force multiply storms. They wanted to be able to create droughts, create rainfall. Rainfall didn't exist. In fact, in Bosnia, when they were doing the war in Bosnia, they were actually seeding the clouds so that there would be no fog in the area.
There's a military document called Owning the Weather by 2025. That's an expressed interest of our military. Aerosols are required to corporatize and control our weather. What we see in the sky on a regular basis, these long white trails that do not dissipate, they actually form artificial clouds and block the sun, is an expressed goal of geoengineers.
Aerosols are discussed in these papers time and time again. So what are these aerosols?
They talk about how they need to spray these metal particulates less than 2 microns in diameter into our upper atmosphere to shield us from radiation, and this is supposed to be good for us.
David Keith talked about using aluminum oxide to be released by small airplanes or jets, And he talked about having to use water vapor as the medium, whereby an aluminum oxide gas could be sprayed into the water vapor produced by jets, and that the rate of flow, by controlling it, they could control the size of the particles. And the smaller the particle size in controlling this process, the longer these particles would remain in the atmosphere.
The metal particulate, which are nanoparticles, they act as what's called cloud condensation nuclei. So when they're introduced into the atmosphere, instead of water, when it evaporates, condensing and forming as clouds, it will actually condense on this metal particulate, and instead of falling as rain, it drifts. At night, those aerosols act as a blanket and they trap heat and actually exacerbate global warming. We've seen a great increase in nighttime highs since these programs have really been ramped up in the past 10 to 15 years.
We know from research recently conducted by Stanford Studies and earlier research by NASA that persistent jet contrails change our climate and are warming areas now like the Arctic and Alaska, and that aviation impacts, because water vapor is a greenhouse gas, is beginning to increase these temperatures each year dramatically over time. The issue becomes for all of us with water vapor is that it's a greenhouse gas, it's one of the major players in warming, and the jets producing the man-made clouds, according to NASA, are increasing warming. The powers that be do not want to talk about water vapor and its impacts because we could take care of that problem right now very easily by putting restrictions on the amount of water vapor that aviation produces. This small click is not offset with anyone talking about the impacts that these programs would have on air pollution, water pollution, crop production, the reduction of direct sunlight reaching the earth on human health, the reduction of direct sunlight on solar panel power production.
A big concern of ours is this: geoengineering programs shred our ozone. Geoengineers are very open about this. Anytime you put particulate aerosols into our atmosphere, it will affect the ozone. We now have a major ozone hole over the northern hemisphere.
The chain reaction that occurs begins to reduce the amount of direct sunlight and can reduce photosynthesis, which all crops, trees, plants, and everything need to survive.
We now have an issue called global dimming. The Earth is now receiving 20% less sun than it did just a couple of decades ago. So it's of great concern. There's nothing left untouched on the planet that this does not affect.
This is referred to in these documents as SRM, or Solar Radiation Management. And what does solar radiation management mean? It means blocking the sun.
The USDA estimate that crop loss in 2030 will double due to abiotic stress. What is abiotic stress? Abiotic stress is everything that chemtrail geoengineering programs create. It's the drought conditions, it's heavy metal contamination, it's too much moisture, it's also fungal overgrowth. Because our sun is blocked, we have an overgrowth in fungus, which is destroying a lot of our crop.
More molds, mildews, fungus, and pests are able to proliferate because of the warmer temperatures at night caused by the man-made cloud cover produced by the jets.
Geoengineers are very open about the fact that geoengineering creates drought. And if you look at the global drought monitor, most of the world now is in drought. Geoengineers state that geoengineering will create droughts in Africa and Asia. Guess what? We have droughts in Africa and Asia. Every day they spray, they are destroying our protective layer. And again, no ozone, no life on the planet. Many people now are beginning to notice that they burn very quickly when they go out into the sun. The reason for that, again, is our protective layer is being shredded every day. No protective layer, no life on this planet.
These experiments, and with global weather patterns and with jet streams and all kinds of things, can get out of hand and can have impacts on people worldwide.
And they're actually terraforming our planet. That's right, they're terraforming our planet. They're changing the very environment that we live in, and they're making it hard for humans to live in this atmosphere, hard for our plants to live, hard for our animals to live. We are not going to have a future. This is a big issue.
Yes, we can geoengineer our atmosphere, but we're also working on geoengineering the oceans with ocean iron fertilization program, which was and has been initiated to show that it's not successful and causes harm to our oceans.
We're seeing the ramifications of this geoengineering in our everyday lives. We're seeing soil being polluted with the agents that are being sprayed: barium, aluminum oxide, and strontium.
Now what happens is when the chemtrails start to descend upon the earth, it oxidizes into what's known as aluminum oxide. This acidifies the soil, devastating crops, water. It can go in and actually make so fish can't take oxygen from the water anymore. This causes them, of course, to die. And we also have research from New Jersey that shows that not only full-grown plants, but seedlings are devastated by this as well.
Aluminum in soils is not good for tree health because aluminum gets into the tree roots, and then it prevents the trees from uptaking enough moisture, water, and nutrients to survive. And so it looks like the trees are dying because of lack of water and drought, when in reality, once aluminum is into the root system, they can be dying because they can't uptake the natural things that they need, nutrients and water, in order to survive. The Texas Weather Modification Board has authorized the use of sea salt as a particulate that's used. Well, every time those clouds rain out after they have been seeded with salt, salt reaches the earth. And it's going to have its impact on freshwater systems, marine life, agriculture, crop production, because the more salt in the soil you have, the less productive it becomes.
Through the sterilization of our soils and thus the destruction of our crops, natural organic farmers are now having a difficult time growing natural organic food.
I mean, we have percolate in the vegetables. We have all kinds of things going on, rocket fuel, gas, all these horrible contaminants, and I can tell you it's from what they're doing in the sky.
The chain reaction that takes place will reduce the amount of food that the earth can provide for us because it changes the soil, changes the pH, and reduces the power generation that plants need, photosynthesis, for growing tall and strong.
The concern for many of us is that if these programs continue, we will not be able to grow anything naturally unless it's a Monsanto abiotic stress resistant genetically modified seed. A number of these crops are what are called terminator seeds. They do not regenerate. So year after year after year, the farmer has to go back to Monsanto, which literally puts the farmers in complete debt. The farmers that are not able to recoup their losses due to the flooding, due to the drought this summer, now are selling their crops for pennies on the dollar. There's a company that's owned by George Soros now that is buying up that property, again at pennies on the dollar. That's an objective of Agenda 21. Once these entities have complete control, they can literally control what crops grow, how much grows, how many people get food. These are natural systems. But through the death and destruction of our natural systems, they come in with their solution, which is genetic modification. And in that genetic modification, they literally usurp the authority of nature or the authority of God, and they bring it under the authority of corporations. The sun drives life here on our planet. We need vitamin D3, which nourishes us, produces certain hormones. Vitamin D deficiency is something that's very common now.
It reduces the amount of direct sunlight that hits our skin when we're outdoors, causing a lack of vitamin D in humans. This lack of vitamin D from this man-made cloud cover and these reflective particles leads to human health problems, which are already being identified in the United States. One of them in recent years has been the advance of rickets, which is almost an epidemic proportion. Not since the time when children were forced to work in coal mines at the turn of the century, instead of going to school and being outdoors during the day, have we seen an epidemic of rickets like is occurring across the United States at this time.
We have aluminum, which we know is linked to Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia, other neurological disorders.
We have seen aluminum-related illnesses go through the roof in Riverside County. We've had over 260% increase. We have autism, ADD, and again, Alzheimer's, all going through the roof.
I came to the conclusion that aluminum-coated fiberglass, or chaff particulates, were used by the ton and released worldwide by the ton for many, many years. These particulates stay in the atmosphere for approximately 20 hours, more or less.
Aluminum, according to the physicians that we've spoken to, actually builds up in the body, so it will accumulate, and if it's not flushed out or chelated, it will compromise the health of an individual. Barium compromises our immune system.
What this means is that after barium exposure, you're actually more prone to virtually all diseases across the board.
We have seen respiratory mortality go from number 8 down to number 3 in the past 6 years. The day-to-day breathing in of these heavy metals will impact our health in a very negative way, leading to cancers and a number of other illnesses.
We do know from studies that putting sulfur up means that it's going to come back down. And in the state of California, it is noted that sulfur can cause reproductive toxicity. And the state of California is required by law to notify the public of any chemicals that can cause cancer or reproductive toxicity, and sulfur is definitely on this list. So these programs are dangerous to us and should be controlled, and the public should be more informed, and that no individual corporation should be able to conduct these programs without public oversight and public consent. And this is a major issue that we're going to be facing in the future more and more.
For your information, geoengineering, also known as chemtrail, is taking place globally, and there are millions of people, scientists, doctors, that know what's going on. Has anybody been looking at the skies here today? Because it went from clear blue for many days, and now we've got crisscrosses all over the sky. My barium was 150 in February. Now it's 190. I also have low blood platelets, which is a problem with clotting, okay? I also have rainwater. If anybody would like to volunteer to drink some. Anybody want to drink some rainwater? It has aluminum in it. And I'm going to tell you how much it has in it. 321 parts per billion, 7.4 for barium, and 5.5 for strontium. Trevor Bajori of the Department of Environmental Quality says this is safe to drink. Anybody want to drink some? I don't. I stay at home. I am disabled and getting more disabled because of what is in our atmosphere.
Excuse me, sir, but your time's up.
Well, extend it. You can extend it. Okay, she spoke for 20 minutes with a high school chemistry class. There's a lot more information out there than that. This is terrible, and you are all being affected by this, and you better wake up, look up, and realize what's being dumped upon us. This is for real. Our own government, the United Nations, is making us sick, and you better wake up. Thanks for the extra time, okay?
Thank you.
I want some answers in writing.
Thank you.
A lot of people like to say, well, no, it's not from chemtrails, it's not from air traffic. If that's the case, fine. Where are the toxins coming from? We need to know this. All of us need to know this because it's in our blood. It's in your kid's blood. It's in your blood. It's in your hair. It's in your bones.
The point is we all live in different households. We live in different parts of the county. Some live also in different parts of the state. We have a couple from Phoenix. We drink different water because the first thing they were trying to throw at us, oh, it's in the water. I did immediately a test. I paid out of my own pocket to see my water if there was any barium. The water is completely clean. No barium at all.
The health department put on a little dog and pony show here locally, trying to, in my opinion, placate the public and try and explain where barium might come from, other sources like Brazil nuts, which I don't eat.
The county tried to discredit us, say, okay, this is in some sort of a magic food, like nuts from Brazil or stuff like that. Come on. First of all, I eat my own food, I grow my own food, and we all eat from different households. We don't live in a commune, okay? So forget the food. I'm not surprised. I mean, let's look at the history. In the last 100 years, it's been proven and completely declassified information. They've been experimenting on people without their consent or will or knowledge. So let's not try to say, oh, my government will never do that. They already done it. Now the point is what they're going to do next.
This next story is so unbelievable, we didn't think it could possibly be true. But after receiving thousands of records and declassified reports from the Army, it's confirmed that during the Cold War, the United States military conducted secret tests on unsuspecting people in the city of St. Louis.
Lisa Martino Taylor's life work has been to uncover details of the Army's ultra-secret military experiments carried out in St. Louis and other cities during the 1950s and 60s.
This study was secretive for a reason. They didn't have volunteers stepping up and saying, yeah, I'll breathe zinc cadmium sulfide with radioactive particles.
These Army archive pictures show how the tests were done in Corpus Christi, Texas in the 1960s. In Texas, planes were used to drop the chemical, but in St. Louis, the Army placed chemical sprayers on buildings and station wagons. City officials were kept in the dark about the tests. The Cold War cover story was that the Army was testing smoke screens to protect cities from a Russian attack. The truth, according to Martino Taylor, was much more sinister.
After enough time goes by, the truth either gets completely hidden or it gets exposed, but still nobody does anything about it. We have to do something about this.
Alright, so if you watched all of that, I really appreciate it. I'm gonna end this video with a clip of a video that I found on the Of Geometry channel entitled Pilots, Doctors, and Scientists Tell the Truth About Chemtrails. Check out that channel for some good chemtrail videos. As always, this is ODD TV. Thanks for watching.
Aircraft making a condensation trail is very similar in many ways to when you go outside on a cold day and exhale. You create a condensation trail. That little cloud is a condensation trail. Now, if you take a 2-mile walk on a cold day and you can turn around and you can see your condensation trail tracking all the way back for 2 miles. That's how crazy it is to think that what we're looking in the sky is actually condensation trails.
The contrails, not the chemical, the contrails occur because of cold air, minus 30. It takes a high altitude, around 30,000 feet plus. There's carbon dioxide and water vapor in that exhaust. That turns to ice crystals, and that's what you see, the white stream behind it. Those white crystals of ice warm up, dissolve, and the smoke goes away. And it never lasts more than a minute. What we're seeing now, and I first could not believe it, and I started looking at the skies, and these are not normal, they're not natural. There's something going on. I don't know who it is or why they're doing it. All I can testify is it's not natural and it's not normal. It's got to be some outside influence doing that. Thank you.
I'm here to give you testimony that chemtrails, they're not contrails, are indeed real. They're spraying almost every day. I watch the clouds and watch the spraying program going on. I want to tell you that we're in very great danger from the pollution that's coming down over us. And we've been led astray by the military-industrial complex, and they're responsible for the cloud's creation and weather manipulation programs. They're dark operations. That's why they're not out in the media.
I look around and I see people are starting to look up and see this. Many times I've spoken about chemtrails, and I get this blank look on my face. What are you talking about? I'm saying, look up. As a pilot, before I fly, I look up. And so, boy, they're really out there working.
When you look up at the sun and you see a white haze, that is aluminum floating in the air right now, and it's coming from the aircraft.
There's a huge amount of aluminum being found because these sprays have aluminum, strontium, barium, manganese, and there's a lot of argument that aluminum is very common to be found, but aluminum is only common in a bonded form. It's not common in a free form, and we're finding high rates of free aluminum in the soil, which is not natural.
The metal compounds that are being used are environmentally dangerous. We need to be monitoring them. We need to be testing them.
Okay, these previous guys, I've watched exactly what they do, and yes, they are correct. I've seen exactly the same stuff, so ditto marks on those. You want some figures? Okay, latest water test, tested the rain. 13,100 micrograms per liter of aluminum in the rain in 2013. Normally, it should be 0.
Don't forget to subscribe.
I think I might want to see more of that, where the people in Shasta, the town of Shasta, what's that drink? We're talking about, and there's just a lot of experienced people I think that was well done. So what do I think? Well, finally having looked into it by just watching a few videos and listening to what people say, just clips of just what people are saying. It's not just one person like me just saying stuff to you and saying that you're an idiot for believing in chemtrails type of thing. Nope. It makes sense. Here's the thing. The guy in the first video, maybe it was the second, I forget, one saying that, hey, as long as you do research into geoengineering, then it just goes down to chemtrails. So chemtrails is probably not the best way to put it as a conspiracy theory. Conspiracy is geoengineering. Chemtrails, how they output it, is just one method of that conspiracy. So it's a conspiracy theory of actual conspiracy. And the reason you can look into it is that there are people called geoengineers. And there are patents for geoengineering. And within those patents, you find the chemicals that they are using. So I'm sorry to people. Well, maybe not, because a lot of you guys are probably thinking, oh, Ebon's gone off the deep end anyway. He's crazy. He's a conspiracy theorist. He's full. He went down the rabbit hole and never came back up. That's what Ebon did. You know, no, maybe not. I went down the rabbit hole, came back up, and I found that, hey, there's a rabbit hole. And there's stuff down there that people didn't want to find. That's why they put it in the rabbit hole. Okay. I'm gonna spend some time trying to find that video. Maybe he put it in some other spot. It's not in his spot. Anyways, that is the video. The second one was from Odd Reality. The first one was from StrangerThanFiction, and yeah, it's like life is stranger than fiction. I don't really need to watch movies. And if you listen to some, well, if you do some research and listen to some people whose conspiracy theory is that they put the truth in the movies, and in reality, they write up the fiction. And the reason for this is that, hey, what you're watching is called fiction. What you're reading is called fiction. So nothing of it can be real, yet in real life, it's real, but it's a lies. So when you're referring to a movie or saying, hey, it's exactly like this movie, kind of, in some ways, people are going, what are you talking about? That's just a movie. That's a sci-fi movie. That's a fiction. It's a pretty good theory. I would kind of agree with it. I would, because it just makes sense. Nothing is making sense because everything's upside down. I mean, I think it's just simple. It's just simple logic, and people who just want to deny themselves it won't answer questions. Like, all you have to do is ask them questions, and they won't answer it because they know the answer supports the conspiracy. For example, does the government lie? Are they going to say yes or no? And if they say no, you can point many times to where the government has lied. Has the mainstream corporate media lied? If they go no, you can say, you're wrong again. Here are multiple times where mainstream media, corporate media has lied. Has there been political corruption? They go no. And you point down all the times there are political corruptions. And you can point all these out within mainstream media itself, which of course we know lies. So either mainstream media is lying that they're lying, which means what? See, it just gets a little bit confusing for them. They want to talk about pedophilia. Has pedophilia occurred in Hollywood? If they go no, you point out the times where, yeah, it has. Has pedophilia occurred in government positions? They say no, you go no, look, here they are. Here are times where it's occurred. And so eventually they either have to deny all the truths that's occurred, and how they're denying it, they're going to pick and choose, saying, oh, that time mainstream media was lying, so there is no pedophilia. Oh, wait, that time mainstream media was telling the truth, and I know because, you know, it just sounds like they would tell the truth. So it's just simple questions, I think, that you can ask anybody, and they'll refuse to answer the question because they don't see the pertinence to it. But the pertinence is there. All you have to do is just ask them one question, yes or no, and if it's no, just easily prove them wrong. And then it boils down to, all right, so where do they write the history books from all the current history about the government, about the media, about corruption and all this other stuff that doesn't seem to occur, or does occur? Well, let's just keep it simple: government and mainstream corporate media. So our history books are written by, and you know this. History is written by the victors. So the ones who are winning right now, of course, are the ones who are super wealthy, super healthy, or at least seemingly wealthy and healthy. We don't really know. We don't get to see their tax information anymore. They hide that even. Even if they do, there's still a lot of money that they could hide. So if the government's lying to you, if the media is lying to you, how accurate can the history books be? And then eventually time always tells, like I always say. And I think that's why when that ex-Air Force lady, let's see if I can remember her name. I took notes, but I may not have gotten her name. She was talking about how, like, for me, everything's like strategic point of view makes sense. Military warfare, controlling the weather is a very, very powerful weapon. They've even admitted to it. NASA, Air Force, etc. There have been plans for it for 2025, in 2001, and later. So, I already know what Snark would say, and the Fed. Snark would say it's condensation, and then, but he's, you know, that's from his perspective. What, he can't refute anything or contest anything where these pilots or commercial airline pilots or all these other people who work in the industry say it's not normal, that's not condensation, because that would last a few minutes at most, not for such a long time. Let's see, I'm gonna search for something. So like I said, you research into geoengineering. There are geoengineers. There's patents for geoengineering. There's actual documentation from NASA themselves and the military. And there's also been methods of the U.S. government secretly deploying agents, chemical agents, to the public. In 2012, that's been released by Freedom of Information Acts. And they've done it without anyone knowing. So can you trust the government? If you say yes, I don't know what to tell you. Okay, Shasta, Chemtrails, let's see. These are excerpts. I would love to see. Oh wow, is that 3 whole hours? Let me see. Oh man, yeah. I mean, I could air this whole thing. I'd love to listen to it. Here we go. So if no one's coming on, we're gonna go 3 whole hours of watching the actual.
So let me go ahead and outline a process for item number R7 so we can all be on the same page and understand what it is that we are doing this morning. R7 is a discussion to receive input and discuss matters regarding geoengineering chemtrails, consider providing direction to staff, and consider taking other appropriate action as necessary. In a few moments, I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Supervisor Giacomini to introduce her guest speaker today. What we have is we have a presentation that has been arranged in advance through Supervisor Giacomini, who placed this item on today's agenda. In addition to that, there are a number of speakers that had been arranged through Supervisor Giacomini to also join with that first presentation in order so that they might be grouped and clustered together. We're going to honor that request and take them as you had asked for in advance and agreed to, Supervisor Giacomini. After that, there are a lot of requests. In fact, a lot. It's a lot, as I'm sure that you recognize. We're going to take those in the order received today. Okay? Now, I'll just say up front, there have been almost 20 requests from folks in the room to change that received order. If you don't want to speak when your name is called, you don't need to speak. So that's up to you, but we're going to take them in deference to every person here and honoring their timely submittal, and we're going to take them in the order we received after the main presentations as were agreed to in advance for their order. So we're going to stick right with what we promised to do. During the speakers that are going to come individually from the community, Supervisor Modi is going to be calling out the first name and then the next name and maybe the next name. And here's what we would appreciate. As we go through the list, if you would listen attentively for your name, and don't hesitate. When you hear your name, go ahead and come over in this direction and line up, because then we won't have to all watch you as you walk from that corner of the room to this part of the room. We'd like to be able to move everybody through as rapidly. I expect that this hearing process, this public process, is going to take 3 to 4 hours based upon the number of people who have requested. So in that, there will be timely personal breaks and probably, most probably, a lunch break as well, where we will continue full force to hear all of the folks who want to speak. At the end of that process, and this is with board approval, I'm suggesting all these items, we're going to conclude and hear every person that wants to speak today. At that time, we're going to end the conversation from the audience then, and we're going to ask Mr. Simon, who represents Resource Management, to come up and share with us his thoughts in response to things that he might have heard, and then we'll continue with a board conversation among the 5 of us here for any possible direction. So questions from board members? Yes. Yes, sir. Supervisor Modi.
Yeah, I have one request, kind of the audience. I know that you're all here and you're very passionate and you want to support the people who are speaking, but we do have well over 50 speakers, which means that's probably a minimum of 3 hours. So I really do ask that you sort of limit your applause as best you can. For number one, because I'm going to be introducing the next speaker and they won't be able to hear you. And number two, it just adds that much more time. And I'm pretty sure most of you don't want to be in this crowded room for 3 hours. We want to hear what you want to say, but I do appreciate the fact that you try to limit a little bit of your passion.
Very good. Thank you, Supervisor Modi. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Supervisor Giacomini to introduce our guest speaker for the day. Thank you, Supervisor Giacomini.
Thank you, Chairman Baugh. Chairman Baugh, did you want to mention the action that the Air Pollution Control Board did several years ago?
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that reminder. There have been several people that already came up today and asked when is the Shasta County Air Pollution Control Board going to hear this item. We asked for and received records on Tuesday, August 5th, 2008. There was a presentation before the Shasta County Air Pollution Control Board. Speaking at that agendized meeting was Russ Wade, David Casebeer, Rodney Compton, Tom Slate, Deborah Whitman, Kimberly Percival, Rose Taylor, Randy Compton, Candace Guthrie, Linda Schreiber, Janice Powell, Dane Wigington, Francis Mangels, thank you. Those are the items or the names I have actually listed, made presentations that day. At the conclusion of that meeting, by motion of Supervisor Modi and seconded by Supervisor Baugh, all the information presented at that meeting was also forwarded to the California Air Resources Board and to the United States Environmental Protection Agency. I simply present this as an update of public information. Supervisor Giacomini.
Perfect. Thank you, Chairman Baugh. It's my pleasure to introduce Matthew Sutton, who will be giving our first presentation, and then he is the only one that gets additional time at the request of the group that came forward.
Speak up.
We can't hear you. Boy, that's not usually a problem with me. Sorry. Okay, introducing Matthew Sutton, and then everybody else will be limited to the 3-minute time period. So.
We didn't hear some of the names in there, Pam. On the original list, we didn't hear all the names on the original list that were given. Hamid Rabi, and do we have the same list?
You emailed it to me. I have it up in my office.
You're referring to. They're all going to speak right now.
It should be the same.
Okay. Let's let Supervisor Giacomini go ahead. She has a prearranged list. I saw the email copy as well, and we're going to go through that list, and then we're going to take those from the community after that. So do we have a clear understanding?
Dane, did you happen to bring the list? Because I have it up on my desk.
We have it here.
I have it here.
Okay, perfect. We're good. We're good. We're covered.
Thank you.
The first one is Matthew Sutton, correct?
I have an announcement to make that Matthew Sutton is not here today. And the reason he's not here today is because he received a phone call from Rick Simon on Thursday, July 10th. I have emails. First, I want to say thank you to the board. I want to say thank you to the board. My deepest respect. I hope we can all respect their wishes. If we can keep that down so we can respect their wishes and get done as fast as we can. Matthew Sutton, who made a commitment to be here today, and here's part of that commitment. These are emails. It's a solid commitment. It's not ambiguous. Dana will participate. I will be able to attend this meeting. Solid commitments all the way through until a phone call last Thursday after an hour-and-a-half conversation, I was told, with Rick Simon from Shasta County. Matthew, after speaking to his attorney, said he could not come. Now, when we see a contract with AECOM...
Mr. Wigington, could you address us, please?
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Les. After this was a surprise to me as well, and perhaps at some point that the context of that conversation can be known, but after this conversation, Matthew let me know that there were contracts between AECOM, which he is the CEO of this company, and Shasta County. So I don't know why that phone call was made and why he had to cancel after that phone call, but Matthew has assigned his time to me in that case. So I'm going to proceed with this, and maybe this issue of this phone call that caused Matthew to cancel can be addressed later.
Okay, so before you start, though, I'm going to address Supervisor Giacomini. Supervisor Giacomini, since you arranged this, did you receive a call yourself, or were you included in this conversation?
No, I was not included in this conversation.
And your invitation stood for Mr. Sutton to address us today?
It did. Now, if there's a legal issue that we don't know about, I guess we need to find out.
I just want to make
later.
sure. Just want to make sure that that invitation was good and not rescinded by you.
Correct.
Thank you.
No, it was, again, the call was initiated by Rick Simon to Matthew Sutton.
Well, my point is that this is the board that extended the invitation, no one else. So I want to make sure that the community knew that that did not change.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Thank
If I
you.
implied that at all. No, it did not come from the board at all.
I didn't think you were, but I want to make sure. Sometimes people just kind of hear what they hear, and that invitation was strong and firm and still exists. We're not going to take questions from the audience, ladies and gentlemen. That's not going to happen.
No.
We're not going to take questions from the audience. Please don't do that. This is a time for conversation from the
Thank you for listening. I'll proceed as quickly as I can now. So we have the issue of climate engineering, and semantics are important. Too much media and other officials, not saying this board, they've been very courteous, but have not used the scientific terms, and this is not used for a reason, because the term chemtrails is not a scientific term, so we try to avoid those terms. But when you see CBS News, geoengineering to fight global warming is now mainstream topic conversation with all scientific organizations and with governmental officials, such as John Holdren, Obama's science advisor, who is actively advocating for the use of geoengineering. And again, these are aspects that media does not cover, because this would legitimize this issue. This would bring credibility to it. So we do have, again, science data it's too extensive to document here, but when we have current administration officials advocating for these programs and the immediate need to implement these programs, this subject should not be marginalized as it typically is by media. When we have, this is from MIT, this diagram is from MIT, where you clearly see an aircraft spraying particulates out the back. Now, again, this is mainstream scientific discussion. We have every major science institution talking about these issues right now, that these programs must be implemented. And so again, what we ask is that this issue be given attention. And our point here today, irregardless of where the contamination is coming from over Shasta County and the rest of the globe, we ask that the science be looked at and that the legitimacy of this issue be acknowledged with the science terms, that this is brought to public attention and brought into a public dialogue. This is, again, only the tip of the iceberg for what's available for documentation. This is a 40-page congressional research document, Geoengineering Governance and Technology. There's a number of documents like this. We have, even going back to the 60s, for example, we have 80-page presidential documents outlining the scope and scale of these programs even back that far. We see skies like this. Certainly, we have a lot of people telling us this is normal commercial traffic, that this is normal, and that this is just random flights flying wherever they fly, and that this stuff sticks in the air. But if this is random, that's not so random. Do we think that commercial aircraft fly in grid patterns? Again, the data is absolutely there, but we have major agencies telling us that this isn't so. In fact, there's a NASA document that says chemtrails aren't real. But again, they use a term that's not scientific on purpose, and at the same time, we have patents from NASA for geoengineering. So there's been a tremendous effort to try to marginalize an issue that's tremendously impactful for all of us, equally impactful. And I certainly don't see the board as adversarial to us. I mean, I'm very grateful that we've been allowed to speak here and bring this issue up to light. And for our point, I think acknowledgement and disclosure is due for, in this case, for local agencies, the contamination issue. Because I've spoken in front of the California Air Resources Board, I've spoken in front of the California Energy Commission, and it seems that all these agencies are unwilling to look at this issue. And at this point, there are certain factors that can't be denied, and contamination is one of those factors. So we have NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, admitting on the record that the atmosphere is now full of particulates, and they don't know where they're coming from. So this is quite astounding when you have the agency that's supposed to study this issue that's literally unable to identify the source. When I spoke in front of the California Energy Commission in Sacramento, they acknowledged the state was losing 20 to 40% of its rainfall from, quote, particulates of unknown origin. But that investigation was never followed through. There's an investigation going right now with state water quality. I spoke to that representative. Their Fish and Game has acknowledged that there's aluminum running down the waterways. I spoke to the representative with California State Water Quality, who made it clear that they were not going to test the rainfall for this contamination, but isn't that where runoff comes from? So again, we have an unwillingness to look at the obvious sources. This is a satellite image. It's a little foggy, but if you look closely in the bottom left quadrant, you can see aircraft trails blanket spraying the Pacific. This is visible on satellite imagery every single day. These silvery white skies we see are particulates blowing in from the coastal regions, and we have patents stating the dire need to enhance the marine layer to try to deflect some of the sun's incoming thermal energy. It's called solar radiation management. So when we have satellite imagery of this happening and planes flying in loops and grids, and we have this material blowing in on us, it's coming from somewhere. And CARB, this is important. We know this metal's falling on us. I furnished you guys today with about 40 lab tests from the state-certified lab showing a very, very substantial amount of metal. And again, aluminum does not exist in the environment in free form. That's important to remember because a lot of agencies try to say it's a common element, we should expect it. This is not the case. It doesn't exist in free form. So it's coming from somewhere, and CARB has told us it is not coming from China. So we know it's a more local origin. Now, we have a UV issue. This is another matter of disclosure for the board. We have a known, verifiable, indisputable contamination issue, and we know the board can't stop this. Nobody here expects that. We know that's far beyond the scope of the board, but we do have a contamination issue that's a danger to the citizens. So what I'm asking is disclosure of this contamination, and we also have a very, very dangerous UV level. The bark is being burned off of trees in town. We're metering this UV with state-of-the-art meters. We're seeing UVB levels 1,200% higher than we're being told. And this is a government document, National Science Foundation, acknowledging that injecting sulfate particles, which is geoengineering, stratospheric aerosol geoengineering, will decimate the ozone layer, destroying from 1/4 to 3/4 of the ozone layer. So this is very significant, and this goes hand in hand with what we see. Again, article, unprecedented ozone hole opens up over the Canadian Arctic. We have very substantial northern hemisphere ozone depletion. Ozone depletion over even northern California is very substantial. We're seeing very dangerous UV levels. We're simply asking that that be disclosed. That's all. So again, this is a public health issue that we believe is necessary to disclose. This is a headline from a week ago. Blazing world record strongest UV rays ever measured on Earth. Many of you are familiar with the UV reading. A rating of 10 or 11 is considered extreme. NASA has just recorded, in fact, this is 11 years old. I don't know why it took 11 years for them to disclose this. Readings of 43. 43 is absolutely lethal to be outside. I mean, it's very dangerous to be exposed to that. So again, we have very high readings here. We're asking for that to be disclosed. Health effects of UV radiation. The list is much longer than what it shows here, but we're seeing everything we would expect to go along with this exposure going off the charts. So again, this comes down to a recognition of what's going on in our skies, and more importantly, where this board is concerned, an investigation and disclosure of the contamination and UV issue, which again is a public health hazard. These are trees in our local parking lots here. The bark is completely burned off these trees. Foliage is dropping. Branches are dying off on the trees. The trees in Redding don't look good, and this is not just a drought-related issue. And I've been in the field with USDA soil scientists measuring also soil pH changes, and this is another arena where we know this contamination is happening. We're seeing pH changes of 10 to 12 times toward alkaline from established USDA soil baseline studies. So again, one more source of confirmation that this contamination is indeed there. Trees in Redding, again, when I moved here 12 years ago, the trees looked outstanding in this city. Now they look quite horrific and getting worse by the day. And this is exactly what would be the known and expected effect with extensive UV damage. Geoengineering causing drought. All of us know we're being droughted out. For 10 years I've said, because the science says so, that the more they aerosolize, the less it will rain here, period. So again, we have yet one more confirmation of when they spray upstream in our storm track, it diminishes and disperses our rain.
Mr. Wiggany, I'm going to ask a question. How much time did we have scheduled for? Okay, has that already passed?
That was a 10-minute beeper.
So let's do this. How much more time do you think?
30 seconds.
Okay, very good. We want you to be able to conclude. Thank you.
Thank you. NOAA already deciding that we're not going to get rain from El Nino, which is astounding that they would know that so quickly. Another satellite photo, and this is hard to see on this screen, but the entire, people can view this at geoengineeringwatch.org, the entire Pacific is covered with grid patterns in this shot. It's hard to see. Prevalence of Alzheimer's disease going off the charts. Autism, 10,000% increase. Known connection with aluminum, same with Alzheimer's and dementia. Alzheimer's and autism, the common link, aluminum exposure. Last slide, the right to know. That's all we're asking. The public has a right to know there's a public health hazard in regards to the heavy metal contamination and the UV radiation. That's all we're asking is for that disclosure. Thank you for the extra time. Thank you for Out of respect to the supervisors, they're showing great courtesy that no other board has had the courage to do yet. So let's give them all the respect they deserve.
Before we move on to the scheduled additional presenters at 3 minutes apiece, and I'm going to just ask in advance as you come up that we're going to hold you to that 3 minutes.
They know that.
I do want to ask this board before, because you're our main presenter today, if there are any additional questions at this time from this board. Okay. So I have just 2 questions, and I'd like to ask you, and please excuse this. This is not meant in any other way, but out of complete respect. Could you just really concisely, what do you believe the purpose of this engineered spraying is? I mean this in all sincerity. What do you say the purpose of it is?
I can tell you what the stated purpose is, by governmental document and U.S. patents.
Yeah, right into that mic there.
I can tell you what the stated purpose is. Solar radiation management, SRM, to block the sun. That's the stated purpose. The consequences don't seem to be considered with these programs, but that is the stated purpose on almost all UN and global governance documents for these programs.
Okay, and obviously you presented a great deal of material to myself and to other board members over the years, and that is the conclusion drawn. I just wanted to draw that out today because I didn't hear that specific language, so I wanted to make sure we state that. But then on a personal level, I have another question, and I've asked many people, and no one's been able to answer this question for me, so I mean this in all sincerity. Why does the spraying create a drought in California and flooding in the Mideast, or the Midwest?
Thank you for asking that question.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it.
When you aerosolize the storm track, and the science backs up what I'm saying word for word, you diminish and disperse the rain. This is not seeding to create rain. This is seeding to create artificial cloud cover. And because there's too many condensation nuclei, it tends to disperse that moisture exactly as we've seen over California again and again. Back to my talk in front of the California Energy Commission, they recognized this fact. I spoke to their top scientist. When you have too many particles in the air, it diminishes rain. It does not augment it if those particles are too small. So it tends to migrate moisture from one place to another, creating drought and deluge. And this is very well documented from every major science institution, from MIT, Scientific American. These effects are known. So it's not a uniform effect. It tends to disrupt the hydrological cycle completely. So when you spray upstream in the storm track, it tends to migrate that moisture somewhere else where it comes down in a deluge. And that's exactly what we see.
Mr. Wigington, thank you very much.
Thank you,
I appreciate that. Don't go away. Folks, I know your encouragement and your passion, but we have other requests to speak, and we're going to kind of be here all day if we... Mr. Wigington, if you'd come back again, please. We're not through with you yet. Supervisor Chappelle.
Thank you, Chairman Ball.
You're welcome.
Mr. Wigington, I've had one statement here, and I want to see if you confirm that or not. In your belief of following through with this and trying to get situations resolved, is it because it is a public health hazard? Is that one of your number one concerns, that this must be disclosed?
That is our request of the board, because that is why these programs can go on and on and on, because media will not cover it until the actual effects are made known. And this contamination issue, again, is absolutely verifiable. Same with the UV issue. We can meter it for you. We have state-of-the-art meters. So, and we have corroboration from other science studies. So yes, that is the request of the board. We fully recognize the board has no power to deal with this issue, nor does CARB, nor other state agencies. But the contamination issue is a public health hazard, and we believe that disclosure is necessary, required, and that's all we're asking is disclosure of the heavy metal contamination and the UV issue. That's what we're asking for. Yes.
Thank you.
Very good. Any other questions from the board of Mr. Wigington at this time? Mr. Wigington, thank you very much for the presentation. And then I'll ask Supervisor Giacomini, do you have the order, or do we want to go to Mr. Supervisor Modi?
My gratitude to all of you.
Thank you, sir.
Leonard, everybody on
Very
my
good.
list. Okay.
So the rest of the agreed upon presentations, they are going to be called out in advance, and then Supervisor Modi is going to move to those who submitted requests today as well to speak. Thank you, Supervisor.
You know, and maybe I can suggest one other way to show your support of the speakers, but at the same time allow us to proceed. I did this one time before, and it worked very well. Rather than yelling or clapping, perhaps if you just choose to raise your hands, that will show us that you support the speaker, but it also will show, as I'm sure you plan to do, is to show, show the support to the media. So maybe both. So maybe that might be one way to get.
You're getting some love, Supervisor Modi. I saw some hands out there.
So, perfect. So the next speaker is Rosalind Peterson, followed by Alan Buckman.
Hello, my name is Iraja Sivadas. Rosalind Peterson of USDA was not able to make it today, and and Dane Wington asked me if I could fill in for her. As I said, my name is Iraja Sivadas. I'm
welcome.
Thank you. I'm a disabled combat veteran, as long as I've stood up in a long time. I really appreciate that you are taking time to listen to us today. I am a